Well, it's great to have you here today. Thanks for joining us in this session. I'm sitting here with Darren Burnell, aka Daz as I call him. He's the founder of the Jethro Project. We've worked together for many years, known him for a couple of decades. In this session, we're going to touch on one of the core things that Jethro is really passionate about, and that's leadership pipelines. But before we do, Daz, I'd love to know, where did this come from? We work with a couple of hundred churches across the country, New Zealand and beyond, many contexts, multiple denominations. Obviously this came out of something. What are you seeing in the leadership context and landscape that really led us to this point?
Well, hi everyone, hi Maddie, and yeah, look, there are a couple of things. There's two things. There's what we've seen in the landscape. There's what I experienced years ago, just personally, when and that was that where it originally started was that I was leading a local church, that time one location, and we're trying to develop leaders, and I had these two calls within 7 days, and both these churches that rang me were high-profile churches, like lots of Australian pastors would have known these two leaders, and they asked this question about, hey, who's raising leaders really well? And I've told one of those leaders since. I thought to myself, if not you, I'm not sure who, right?
Yeah.
And so that started me on a journey to go, we spent a lot of time raising leaders. Clearly what we're doing isn't working the way we'd hoped. And it set me on a journey to go, hey, how do we raise leaders by design in an organised way rather than organic? So that was the first piece, and we started to do that. But then, of course, the other piece was when you and I, started to work in this space, we had our own leadership pipelines, and there are two things. One, we realised that there was a leadership crisis, not to be dramatic, in terms of denominations broadly, looking at a cliff in terms of succession and replacement without even considering expansion and planting. And you and I both in that space, and we work with 8 denominations directly at an executive level across Australia. And so there was that piece going, we've got to do more if we're going to change it. And here's what we knew. We knew that organic leadership development wasn't getting it done, though it's effective. And our colleges, as good as they might be, aren't going to get done what the God-appointed future needs. And so that set us on a journey. We built out pipelines. They began to be effective. As you've alluded to, we started to work with churches all over Australia. But then someone said to me, what if you took the principles that you guys build with and developed leadership pipelines for them? And I remember sitting in that meeting and I had this moment of, it's a bad business decision, if I can call it that, but a brilliant kingdom one, because it disconnects you from us and creates viral capacity for the church across Australia. And so that's really the backstory to where we get to the place where obviously we have lots of leadership pipelines, but now we, what we would call design leadership pipelines for your unique environment.
This has incredible weight and impact and potential in churches and denominations. Where does this come from? For you, what was the scriptural foundation that really sparked much of this?
Yeah, well, there's a few scriptures that really, shaped why we're sitting here doing what we do. And, I suppose the starting place is to go, Jesus said to go into all the world and make disciples. And so disciple making is what it's all about. And then, of course, Romans adds and says, and he's made some to be teachers, some have got the gift of encouragement, some are called to be leaders. And so there's discipleship. And then I would say our zone is leadership discipleship. So we're trying to disciple and develop leaders. So that's the first thing to say. But really where it really gained traction is going back to the Old Testament. Exodus 23 verse 31 is a promise of God to the children of Israel. Not for the first time, but for the first time since Moses' Jethro encounter. And verse 31 is a promise of God. And it's like this incredible, expansive, God-appointed future. But in verse 29 and 30 is the fine print. And it says, I'm not going to do this for you in a year, otherwise it would overwhelm you. But I'm going to bring this to pass little by little as you increase enough to handle it. So my brain went, well, one of the things we've got to do to be able to handle the expansive God-appointed future is raise leaders. Every time we raise a leader, we multiply impact, build a leadership culture, and we create viral potential. God wants to move. Sometimes he just needs the leaders and the pastors to be able to move. And so that's the first thing. Then you go to Acts 6, verse 1. You got widows being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. It's a bad day for the church. Then what do? They say, we're going to do something about it. They appoint 7 men to oversee it, full of the Spirit and wisdom. And with that one change, here's what happens. The widows are now fed and pastorally cared for. Who knows, God might have been able to do even more widows there. The apostles are released into their next season, and the church goes forward with fresh gospel momentum. 7 leaders changed everything. And then, of course, Paul says to Timothy, entrust to faithful men what I have entrusted to you. And so there's this multi-layered approach to developing pastors and elders and leaders. And well, that's kind of the theological framework that has, you and I and the team really giving the best of our lives to raising pastors and leaders and building capacity into churches.
I love it. I'm familiar with what this does, and I'm familiar with what it looks like, and have worked with a number of people on this journey. But for those who this is fresh and new to them, why don't you just take a couple of minutes and give us the overview of building and developing your own purpose-built leadership pipeline?
Yeah, so what we did was we just sat down and honestly went, how do we do it? I don't think we'd ever sat down and formulated it, and it was, but we'd had these highly effective pipelines, and so we sat down and went, what is it we do? And created a framework, and like all of these things, sounds like you perfected the art straight away, but as you do something and do it again and do it again and do it again, you refine the art and the science of it. So really what we did went on that journey, and we started to see outcomes. And literally I was sitting with a guy just a few weeks ago who 2 years ago had leadership gaps in terms of pastors on staff that he couldn't fill the roles of, and no one in a leadership pipeline because there wasn't one. And so we worked with him, and then we worked with him and his team, and then we took 6 months to build just one level of their pipeline. And he got to the start of February this year, launched it, and they got 40 people in it. Now, what's crazy is those people were sitting across the church already. They're probably just going to do something else with their lives. And with just building a by design leadership pipeline for their environment, they unearthed 40 leaders that are now in that system, and some of them will go on to plant and pioneer and lead in different spheres and all of that. So in terms of that, what we did was we basically just worked out what we did. And here's it. Number one, it'll come up on the screen, is just go, hey, clarify your level. What we mean is we've got to start somewhere. So if you're just getting started, this will be helpful to you. Clarify the level of leader/pastor that is going to be game changing for you if you raise them. So in one church, it's going to be a department leader, a team leader, a group leader. In another church, it's going to be a campus or location pastor. For another church, it's going to be church planters, right? Whatever it is, what's going to be game changing for you. Then the second piece is create HD, high definition around the leader you're trying to raise. And why is that? You and I sat in sessions, Matt, where people can fill a whiteboard and could go around every wall in the room with what we should develop in a leader. But of course, that's not going to get it done. So what we help churches do and leaders do is define the leader they're trying to raise. So for example, our expansion ready leader, that is designed to raise a leader who could lead 1 to 3 locations. And so HD is to go, well, what's our definition of that leader? And we would say it's a Christ-like leader, able to grow people, build capacity into the church, and lead expansion.
Love it.
Christ-like, grow people, build capacity, lead expansion. They need to be able to do all of those things. And so what happens is that takes a whole lot of things off the radar of what we're trying to build into that pipeline, and it very much determines what goes in. Everything we do in that leadership pipeline is aligned with one goal, developing that leader. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love it.
So that's HD. We do the big whiteboard process. Once we've got it, we do storyboarding, which is a vital piece. We do the 6-lens filter to fill out what might need to go in there. And then we start to really design the pipeline. And we have a bunch of templates for that, and then your way. Creating playbooks, which is a critical piece for us, right? So the thing about the playbook is this. Even if you intuitively can do something, the leaders you're raising probably can't. So for those who don't know you, you're a great builder of culture. Like if you lead something, culture is going to be strong at the core, it's going to run deep and wide. But the person following you isn't going to necessarily be able to do that. So how do we create culture clarity? How do we then build it strong into us? How do we then build it strong at the core? How do we raise culture carriers, and how do we get it to run deep and wide? So most people are going to need tools and training to get that done. And so that's an example of a playbook session, Visioneer, 4D leadership. Then you want to finalise the framework, and which is how we're going to deliver this. And what does that look like? In person, online, how does it run? Build your ecosystem. And that doesn't apply to everyone, but for some churches and many denominations, we need to think about the ecosystem that is feeding into our leadership pipeline. And then we do what we call it Launchpad. How are we going to roll this out as we get started? Because you want to do that well. The only other thing I'd add to that is right near the end of the process, and you might see this come up on the screen, we do this 5 kind of filters over it where we just take one more look at our leadership pipeline before we go live, because we want it to be compelling and game-changing for people. So as that comes up on the screen right now, you'll see there it's got design, digital, disciple, demand, and dashboard. Design is we just want to think about it one more time. What else can we do to optimally create a design here? And that's a critical piece. What have we missed? Digital, and we're thinking about the launch and the reach and optimizing and how we can help engagement, making it easy for people. Disciple, what we've talked about so far is development. But at what points does development need to turn into discipleship? And that's an important piece of leadership development. And then demand, is there a demand quality to this? Is it compelling? Does it just engage the faithful and those who feel obligated? Or does this actually speak to people and go, I need to explore this and probably engage with it? This will be transformative. We want it to have a demand quality to it. And then the last piece is, what's your dashboard going to be around leadership? And we help you work all of that. And then we go into Launchpad, and away we go, and trusting God to move.
I love it. I know leadership pipelines are a really significant need for people. So I'm excited about this, and I love being a part of it myself. If I can throw one last question at you, Daz. A church, a denomination leader comes on the journey with us. They do this process. What do they walk away with, and what would be the end result 12, 18 months down the track for them?
Yeah, so what we want them to walk away with, Maddie will know, we made it our goal to make ourselves unemployed, right? That's real. Because the best way we can do it is keep you connected to us, right? But we determined as a team to go, you know what? Our goal is to be unsustainable in Australia by 2030 because we built so many leadership pipelines for people. That has viral potential to see the expansion of God's kingdom and one day revival. Beautiful. And so that's the first piece. What we want people to leave with a well-organized, purpose-built pipeline for their church environment that is perpetually raising new leaders, developing established leaders, so that when you get 18 months down the track, you've got more leaders coming through. You know, it's easy to appoint a leader. Anyone can appoint a leader. There's nothing in that. We could walk out here right now and appoint someone as a leader. That doesn't do anything. We've got to raise them. So in 18 months, we want you to be raising competent leaders. We want there to be expansive leadership potential. Every time we raise a leader, we multiply impact. Every time we build a leadership culture, we create viral potential. And we want those two things going on 18 months from now for you. And so that's kind of where it's at. And we run workshops, we coach, obviously, all around this stuff.
I love that. At the end of this process, they're going to walk away with an outline, an identified leader they want to build, a process to take them through it, a playbook, delivery pathways, and everything they need to roll that out for their context in their place. Yeah. I think it's a fantastic thing. And I tell you, as someone who's worked with you on this and with leaders on this, I think this is a real game changer. So I'm really excited about this. If you want to know more about leadership pipelines, you know where to find us. Thanks for joining us in this session. Thanks, Daz. Thanks for indulging me as we unpack that a bit. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.